There are so many financial concepts that I go over on my channel here, but I want to break down in this video exactly how I made my wealth. Hey, what's going on? This is Mauli Vodi with Financially Present, your one-stop shop for financial and investment education. And today I'm just gonna to lift back the curtain or pull up the veil, whatever expression you prefer, on how financial influencers navigate in this space, because there are so many ways to go about this and building wealth that it's going to be hard if you're on the outside of this, because you're going to see dozens and dozens of creators using different financial savvy to build their wealth. And I just want to be specifically clear about how I was able to build my wealth through investing. Okay, so the financial influencer industry, I would like to call it, is very much so a community of practice. People are here in different pockets, and I find myself, in fact, I only recently started referring to myself as a finfluencer, but it's because of my experience and expertise after being a stockbroker for nearly a decade. But I've come to find out that there are a lot of different nuances. For example, some people have a rags to riches story, and others, maybe they had some extreme outside of the box type of discipline that they mixed with some business savvy and was able to leverage that into who they are today. And I'm here to tell you that I guess I'm a little bit of both, and I'll explain. So for my journey, for example, I grew up in a two-parent household, two Ghanaian parents, so they were very cost conscious. They were conscious about spending and operating and navigating in PG County, Maryland, where I grew up. And they were focused on providing and supporting for me and my siblings, and then family abroad as well. And that came with a different level of consciousness about money for me. So I was very, very conscious about how I spent and what to avoid. My parents were able to hustle enough and eventually build up their own business. And I think that's really what helped propel me and my siblings and other family members into a different phase of life. But throughout all of that and seeing them be business owners, there were some things that I learned. And also, for me, I had this a semi-fear of debt, right? I knew I never wanted to let it get too out of hand, or I didn't want it to be a master over me, basically. But then I also knew that there was money to be made out there through investing. I just needed to figure it out. And that's what led me to my career as a stockbroker. So why do I bring that up? Well, I mean, debt is really important when we talk about how wealth is built here in this country, and it either could propel you into it, or it could be to your detriment. It could make it seem insurmountable or unreachable. And for me, I knew that if I kept an eye on debt in a certain way, I could probably end up fine. And that's kind of what I did. My approach is I was never debt-free. So when you look at me, just know that, hey, I don't have a problem carrying a credit card balance. I just need to make sure that it's something that's always within reach or can be paid off, right? I have no desire to be 100% debt-free. In fact, there's others out there that say, hey, well, they would rather pay off their mortgage. For me, that's not my case or my situation. I don't think it's advantageous for me. The main differentiating factor for me was that when I started working full time, straight out of college, I never stopped investing long term. That is how I built my wealth, period. You see, my fear of debt, or let's say credit card debt, it was there, but it wasn't debilitating. So I didn't completely avoid it. I just had to make sure that I had it under control. And when I jumped into the investment industry, I started getting conditioned to allow more risk into my life and just focus on investing. So I knew that if I invested more than I had debt or credit that was borrowed, then I knew I was gonna be somewhat fine. So if some of this is numbers and some of this is temperament, but you have to figure out where you lie on that spectrum. Are you driven more by the numbers, or are you going to be driven more by your behaviors and who you are? Because that's the difference maker. I knew that if I invested long-term and just kept being consistent and patient enough, that things would invest and compound and really work in my favor. So as far as what's part of my story and what's not part of my story, the things that are not part of my story is I didn't rack up so much debt that I needed to have a side hustle to dig my way out. I didn't have this horrible credit score that I had to repair. And I didn't get denied by things due to my credit score. I didn't house hack and buy a property and flip it. I didn't rent a multifamily unit. There were specific things that those stories, they just don't fall into my timeline. And I wasn't broke or homeless or anything like that, thank God. And this is not to shade anybody's story or to minimize anyone's journey, but I just wanted to make it clear that this is not mine. So there's some level of privilege that I happen to come into, and I'm thankful for that. But it doesn't mean that it didn't come with its own difficulties or discipline that was required on my part. On the flip side, things that are part of my story. You see, I overthink purchases when I make them. In fact, I think very critically about purchases before I make them. I'm very disciplined in investing long term. I've never really had to pull from my investment accounts because I've situated other things to make that the focal point first. That way investments are further on in the backdrop. When I got my first full-time job, I just continued to invest in my 401k. In fact, I never stopped investing in my 401k. I've tested out day trading and swing trading, and I just knew that none of that worked for my lifestyle. So I knew that long-term investing for me was what was gonna work better, especially with me being in the industry as a stockbroker. I was able to actually observe the mistakes that people would make, and I knew that I was not going to replicate that. So I was able to learn about those, the advantages and disadvantages of certain styles of trading. My student loans, those I paid them on time every month, not a dollar late or a day short, for 10 years straight. I didn't rush to pay it off, and I didn't defer it. When I was in college, my girlfriend at the time, after 2 years of us dating, we opened up a joint savings account. And that's now my wife of 12 years, almost 12 years. And another part of my story, I follow a loose budget. There are other things that are prioritized and other things that there's a lot of wiggle room, and that allows for room for me to improve my budget. But when you invest long-term, it creates different levels of space and some flex that you can have. Another part of my story is we have 2 kids, and we put them through daycare for the first 3, 4, 5 years of their life. And now that they're out, we're enjoying that in different ways. And it shifts and changes, how we view budgeting and investing in life experiences. But I say all of this to say that those aspects are part of my story and not all of the other stuff that other people may have. So I want you to take that into account when you watch financial influencers. Just understand that their journey is different. It's different from yours, and some of it may relate and some of it may not, but you kind of have to zero in on what is going to work for you and find a way to tune out the noise. But again, I live a relatively modest life. You're not going to see me wear a whole bunch of designer stuff. That's just not my vibe. I've just invested nonstop since 2009. There were times where I was able to invest a lot, and other times where, it was not as much as I would have liked, but I never stopped. So that's what's brought me to where I'm at and has allowed me to build this type of wealth where technically if I pause now, I would still be in a pretty decent place. And again, I just question for you, hey, what aspects of your life may you be looking at and thinking that, hey, well, this person may not be able to relate, or, oh, that isn't for me. And just use that filter when you're realizing that, hey, some of these influencers out here are coming from a different perspective, and you have to take that into account when it comes to their advice or the knowledge that they teach. Mine is centered in investing and coming from a background where I didn't necessarily have much. If you want to understand a little bit more about the journey and why I left being a stockbroker, check out my other video here. But until next time, stay present.